What's good, guys? Welcome to Crime Sober Day 4. Now, today's episode focuses on Doreen Hitchens. Doreen was 8 months pregnant at the time of her murder, and what's so sad about this case is she died on Halloween night by her ex-husband. Now, this episode did appear on the hit show called Snap on Oxygen. If you ever want to go check it out, I'll link it down below so you can go view it and see the people who actually knew Doreen. Now, Doreen was born in Santa Clara, California in 1952, and she comes from a very loving family. And she comes from such a loving family that she grew up wanting to help people, and that's how she entered the medical field. Now, she would meet Michael Dennis, who worked. Hey guys, let me jump in here real quick. I apologize. His name is actually William Michael Dennis, but as you'll see in the video, I will be calling him Michael because that is what he went by. So I do apologize that I never said his actual first legal name. I realized that after editing it. So bear with me, guys, but let's get back into this story because it's a crazy one. Meet Michael Dennis, who worked at Lockheed as a sprayer, which was kind of next door to where she worked. Now, when the two began dating, it had been stated that it was a very odd touch because Michael, he suffered from hearing loss and he was not very sociable. And Doreen was very, lively. So it's kind of extrovert, introvert, intertwining, but oftentimes it does work. But it was just very different. So the two would later marry months later and welcome a baby boy by the name of Paul. Now, sadly, in their relationship, things would start to take a turn. And it had been stated because Michael suffered from this hearing loss, he was often very moody, he often would be very depressed, and it affected their relationship a lot. So when Paul was born, they thought maybe the relationship would, grow stronger. But sadly, that was not the case. In 1977, the two would divorce and Doreen would get full custody of Paul. Now, it had been stated that Mike was very bitter about the divorce. He was very upset. And I mean, who would be if you find out that this person gets to have full custody of your child? It's very different territory. So as time would go on, Doreen would meet Charles Erbert. And this is when she feels like life is kind of like picking back up for her. Now, Michael, he was very upset about this because he felt that Doreen moved on very quickly. Now, I don't really go off of a person's time frame because, again, you meet someone who changes your mind or your world, and deadlines, timelines just don't necessarily matter, are happy together, and they end up welcoming a baby girl by the name of Deanna in 1979. Now, you can only imagine the frustrations, the bitterness, the upsetness, if that's a word, that Michael is feeling. Because one, your ex-wife is now happy with someone else. She's done welcomed another baby and has full custody of your kid. But sadly, in February of 1980, the family would not be such a blended family. 4-year-old Paul would later die because he ended up climbing over a fence to get into the pool, and sadly, Paul would drown. And he was put on life support, but he ended up dying 3 days later. Now, this made Michael very infuriated, and he decided that he wanted to take out a wrongful death suit on Charles and Doreen. But Doreen and Charles end up winning the wrongful death suit. And it had been stated that Doreen was the only one home at the time, and the fence was actually closed, but Paul would climb over that fence and ultimately jump into the water. And it's so sad because it's such a tragic situation that, you want to say you need to be watching your kid, but I wasn't there. So yeah, it had been stated that by Paul dying, this had pushed Michael over the deep end of how he truly felt about Doreen, because he was already infuriated with her because of the divorce. She moved on. She didn't welcome another baby, and now your son is dead. In reports, it had been stated that Michael actually did not live too far from Charles and Doreen, so he was able to kind of see how her life was going from afar, and it having turned out that he ended up seeing that Doreen was actually pregnant again. So I can only imagine the frustrations that he was feeling, you know, the jealousy and envy that was going on in his mental. Think about it, him being this man who was not really sociable, you know, he was already going through hearing loss, he was depressed, and that was kind of the reason why your marriage broke up. Oh, I know he was off the deep end, honey, when he seen her being pregnant again. So on Halloween night, 1984, this is when he comes up with a plan. He actually goes to the store, he gets a machete, he gets a wolf-like mask, and of course it's Halloween. Everyone's wearing costumes, so you're not really thinking about this, right? Usual, you know how Halloween is. If you celebrate it, you go out to trick or treat. Well, Doreen took Deanna out to trick or treat, and Charles, he went to the liquor store to get more candy because he had been home handing out candy. So it was kind of like they had shifted off. Around 9 p.m., there's this big banging on the door. And Doreen, she goes to the door and she sees this person in this, you know, mask, this wolf-like mask. And this bang was not like a typical knock. It was like someone banging on the door like they are the police, okay? When he left, when Charles left, he told Doreen to lock the door. Now, there isn't much details to say if she did or not. But nonetheless, Michael was at this door with the mask, but she didn't know this at the time. He had the mask and the machete, and as he's coming into the home with that machete, she tells Deanna to hide because he's basically saying that he's going to kill her. Like, can you imagine a child and you seeing your mom literally about to be attacked by this man and she's telling you to hide? Once he was done, he ended up, I guess, getting spooked because he heard something. He ends up fleeing outside through the front door, throwing the mask and leaving the scene. And Deanna was still hiding. She literally hid so good she didn't make a peep. She was so afraid. Can you imagine hearing all of this that must have went down? So Charles ends up returning home. He sees the front door is unlocked and will open, and he's seen such a bloody massacre. He sees Doreen literally in the front as you walk through, and y'all, this man literally cut the baby out of her stomach and chopped the baby up, y'all, with that machete. You know how much hatred you have to do that to someone, regardless of how you feel about them or how you feel that they moved on with their life. Crazy is he like cut Doreen's hand off. It was just like a truly bloody massacre. You know, he picks Deanna up to put her up so she's not seen anymore. It's like utter chaos. And when police get there, they initially think that Charles did it. Of course, you know, they always go after your family first, right? As law enforcement begin to do their work, you know, they question Charles. They basically ask him tons of questions, and they end up finding a mask that was actually thrown from, you know, Michael on the front, and he asked him if he had recognized the mask, and he basically told them no. And they had ended up finding out, of course, that Doreen was actually married before. And they go to Michael's house, and y'all, this man is in a robe. He acting like nothing happened. Law enforcement begins to question him. Like, they see that inside his apartment or house, he also has like blood in it. So they knew something was off, and they knew that he did something to Doreen. But when they questioned him, of course, he denied any actions about it. And he had a cut on his hand, and they asked him how he had, you know, got that cut. He said something with like a knife, and they're just like, okay, like, we don't believe you. As law enforcement begins to, you know, get details of this night, you know, they had found out that, you know, if Charles was home, he would have most likely been another victim as well, because, you know, he had this machete, he had some handmade coffins that were made. Like, he had like a whole plan for this family, sad to say. Well, law enforcement couldn't initially arrest him because they did not have enough evidence, which is crazy. But you have to remember, back in the 1980s, very different than now. On November 5th, 1984, this is when he was arrested again, and he was finally arrested for the murders of Doreen and her unborn baby. And this gave special circumstances, so it allowed him to be eligible for the death penalty because, you know, this is like a heinous crime. And it had been found out that they actually found proof that he had on the wolf mask because he was at a party, and a woman ended up, you know, turning in that photo. Like, this man was crazy, y'all. He probably got drunk and was like, oh yeah, tonight's the night. 1988, he pled guilty to first-degree murder and second-degree murder for the unborn baby. On September of 1999, he was sentenced to death, and he will live out that term until his final moments in the San Quentin prison. An interview that Deanna and Charles did in 2016, they basically tell Michael that they forgive him. You know, what he did not conquer them, and that they're living their life despite the bad circumstances that he put their family through on that Halloween night. Like, so sad. I can't even imagine as a kid witnessing that and having to grow up and dealing with that. Like, whew. Today's episode, guys, as always, in sending the family love and light. I can't even imagine how that feels many years later, and to know that Halloween would basically be scorned for me. Like, I would literally hate Halloween. But nonetheless, love and light to Doreen's family. Ooh, child, people crazy, y'all. Like, they let Halloween get the best of them and go off the deep end. Bye, guys. See you tomorrow.